Welcome, we hope you enjoy your stay here with Gale of Tales.
Blood and Stone. Written by Lena Simone. Part 2, Veil Markers. The days blurred together, each folding into the next with quiet, unyielding repetition. Mornings began with a zombie-like ritual of coffee, followed by the steady churn of bicycle wheels beneath her. A shower, a meal, a computer screen, a sketch, each task automatic, each moment familiar, but hollow. Delaney moved through them on autopilot. Present, but unanchored, she was now haunted by a single memory that had begun to force its way back into her consciousness. It always began and ended the same. She was stuck in a loop that felt like a quiet dread she couldn't shake. Her memory began with her and True under the enormous table, its dark underside stretching out like a cavern. She, 7, and True, 6, huddled beneath it, shoulders touching, trying to be smaller than their fear. The only light came from the flicker of Christmas bulbs in the other room. Just enough to cast shadows, but not enough to chase them away. Their giggles had died quickly, replaced by a stillness too heavy for children. True clutched a white teddy bear, worn and soft. Delaney's hand, she remembered, was wrapped around something else. It was cold, hard, and rough. She didn't know what it was, only that she wouldn't let go. Then came the sound. A soft rustle beyond the white French doors. Her and True's wide eyes snapped toward it as they held their breath in perfect silence. The doors remained closed, but the sound didn't stop. It grew, slow and dragging, like something heavy, deliberately making its way across the floor, or through the air. Then the shadow shifted beneath the door. Not a blur of darkness, but something with depth. With shape, moving in a rhythm that felt aware. Delaney's heart slammed against her ribs, the beat wild, frantic. Her fingers clenched tighter around the object in her hand, its sharpness biting into her palm. But it was a strange comfort. It was something tangible, something she could hold on to. No one opened the door. No voice called their names. There was only the shadow, growing longer, swaying with terrible patience. And then, nothing. She woke, stiff. Her breath shallow, with the chill of the dream still crawling over her skin. In the dark room, beside her, the clock glared. 4:44 a.m., its red light cruel and unwavering. The house was silent but for the soft groan of old wood and the faint hum of the radiator. Everything felt suspended, as if the dream hadn't fully let her go. She stared at the ceiling, unmoving, her thoughts spiraling. Why now? Is this just a dream? Why does it feel so real? Why didn't I remember it before? No, it hadn't been a dream. She was almost sure of it. The details were too sharp, too visceral. That kind of fear didn't come from imagination. It felt too real. But why had her mind hidden, whatever this is? She sat with the question, unnerved by the silence of her own thoughts. What else have I buried? Delaney's left hand drifted into view. It tingled, as if the memory had returned not just to her mind, but to her body. She could almost feel the weight of the object again. The coarse edges, the way her child fingers had curled around it, like it meant something to her. It was rough-edged and irregular. Its surface uneven, with dips and ridges. Was it a stone? Why would I be holding a stone? What else was I not seeing? She closed her eyes, hoping for clarity. But the memories only came in flashes. The soft pulse of Christmas lights. True's breath against her arm. The swaying, watching shadow beyond the door. And then the same snap. The same shut door. The same silence. Her throat was dry, and her stomach clenched into a tight, uneasy knot. She rolled onto her side and pulled the blankets higher, staring into the farthest, darkest corner of her room. Why now? But no answer came. Only a quiet certainty settled deep in her chest. Now that this memory had returned, it wouldn't let her go. Not again. The very next morning, the dream's imprint was still sharp, and Delaney felt an undeniable pull toward her art supplies. The phantom pressure of the object, no, the stone, still ghosted her palm. She laid out her charcoal sticks, blending stumps, and erasers with a precise, but desperate urgency. The textured, slightly yellowed paper of her scrapbook seemed to hum with anticipation. She worked with a focused intensity, sketching each curve, dip, and jagged groove of the stone meticulously. The charcoal's whisper against the page was a tether, drawing her deeper into the elusive memory. When she finally leaned back, the drawing seemed to stare back at her, rough and unassuming, yet imbued with a strange, ominous presence. A rock? Ezra's voice, startlingly close, snapped her out of her trance. He was passing her room, already halfway down the stairs. Delaney quickly wiped her charcoal-stained hands on a towel, then draped it casually over the drawing. She found him leaning against the kitchen counter, sipping water, his dark curls still damp from a run, hung loosely above his eyes. "Yeah, a rock," she said, trying for a casual tone that felt brittle. Ezra lifted a brow, a knowing smirk playing on his lips. "Visualizing your oppression, huh?" Delaney offered a weak smirk but didn't reply. He wasn't wrong. He set his glass down, crossing his arms. "So, guess what? Elias got a new gig." Delaney perked up, genuinely curious. "Really? Where?" "Some architecture firm in the city," Ezra chuckled, a hint of genuine surprise in his voice. "He actually likes it, which is a shocker. But I think it has more to do with his coworker, Aurea." Delaney tilted her head. "Aurea? Yeah, apparently, she's the sun, the moon, and the stars. He's totally obsessed. It's actually kind of hilarious to watch." Delaney grinned. "Elias? Obsessed? That's definitely news, right?" Ezra said as he leaned back against the counter. "He keeps bringing her up in every conversation. Aurea said this, Aurea suggested that. I'm starting to think he took the job just to hang out with her." Delaney laughed. "Well, good for him. He deserves to be excited about something. Even if it's just a crush." Ezra nodded, his gaze lingering on her for a moment before he shifted the conversation. "What about you? How's everything going?" Delaney hesitated, then shrugged, the casual gesture feeling forced. "Fine. I've just been trying to adjust." Ezra gave her a pointed look. "That's vague, even for you." She exhaled slowly, leaning against the opposite counter. "I'm just getting used to being back here. Not knowing what's next. All while trying to find happiness and a meaningful job. Nothing too heavy," she finished with a dry laugh. Ezra's expression softened. "Hey, you don't have to figure everything out at once." "Yeah," she admitted, "but..." Ezra cut her off, a playful smirk returning. "Maybe this is the universe forcing you to slow down." Delaney rolled her eyes, but a small smile touched her lips. "Maybe." Ezra reached for an apple, tossing it lightly in the air before catching it. "You'll figure it out. You always do." She met his gaze, and a genuine flicker of gratitude warmed her. "Thanks." He winked. "Start with finding that rock." Her eyebrow shot up. "Why would you say that?" "What?" Ezra shrugged innocently. "Isn't locating the source the first step in solving any problem?" "The source?" Delaney echoed, a strange ripple passing through her. "Yeah, the source," Ezra replied, his tone suddenly more serious, almost cryptic. "If something's holding you down, find out what that is. Find that rock, sister." He turned and walked away, leaving Delaney standing alone, the weight of his words settling heavily in the silence. As the seed he planted began taking root, she whispered to herself, "Find the rock." Later that afternoon, with a newfound curiosity propelling her, Delaney found herself in the attic. It was a graveyard of forgotten relics, old boxes and trunks stacked like silent sentinels, furniture draped in yellowed shrouds, and stacks of brittle newspapers that seemed like they would crumble to dust at the slightest touch. There was a single, grime-covered window that allowed a meager shaft of light to pierce the oppressive darkness, illuminating swirling motes of dust as she stepped carefully over warped floorboards. The weight of history was heavy, making the space feel both sacred and suffocating. She inhaled deeply, and a frown creased her brow at the aggressive scent of aged wood and dust. Her mother, ever organized, had labeled what seemed like an endless number of boxes, making it easy for Delaney to investigate and channel her inner Nancy Drew. Her fingers skimmed the rough, splintered edges of a wooden chest, its brass hinges tarnished green with age, before her gaze fell upon an old storage box pushed into the farthest, darkest corner. Unlike the others, this one felt different. Her mother's maiden name, Halvorsen, was etched into the wood in careful, deliberate strokes. An inexplicable chill traced its way down her spine as she crouched beside it, her fingertips tracing the deep grooves, softened by time. She opened the box, sifting through layers of old clothes, photo albums, books, and random forgotten trinkets. At the very bottom, nestled, almost hidden, she found a smaller box. Its cardboard surface was faded and stained, and the words, "For you," were scrawled across the lid in ink that had bled slightly. Strangely, it was written in handwriting that was jagged and uneven, as if written in a frantic rush. The box itself, once white, had yellowed with age. Its corners were frayed and dented, and its edges sealed with brittle, cracking tape. She swallowed hard, her heart thudding against her ribs, like a frantic bird trapped within her chest. With hands that trembled slightly, she pulled the box toward her. It was heavier than she expected, weighted with something more than just cardboard and paper. She peeled back the tape. The sound was a surprisingly loud tear in the otherwise silent attic. Lifting the lid, she pushed aside crumbling layers of newspaper, and then, there it was. The stone. It lay nestled in the depths of the box like an ancient artifact awaiting rediscovery. Its surface was rough, marked with strange, jagged grooves that looked almost intentional, carved with purpose. As she reached out, the air around her seemed to shift, and there was an almost imperceptible drop in temperature that sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. Her breath hitched as she lifted the stone from the box. It was heavier than she'd imagined and cold to the touch, but within moments, as she held it, it began to warm. Then, impossibly, a crimson light seeped from what looked like symbols etched into its surface, glowing faintly in the dim attic light. Delaney's breath caught, held captive, as the symbols seemed to shift and pulse, as if alive. The sensation was unnerving, profoundly alien. And then, she felt it, that familiar fear, sharp and primal, rising in her chest, suffocating her. The memory of that night returned with a ferocious, undeniable clarity, yanking her back through time, back to the terror. Suddenly, she saw her 7-year-old self, crouched beneath the dining table with True. She could see past the wooden chairs that formed a protective, yet ultimately fragile, barrier around them. There was a rustling sound that grew louder from beyond the French doors, and a shadow, impossibly dark, swayed with an unnerving sentience, almost as if it felt their very presence. Her hand, searing with the stone's sudden heat, subconsciously tightened its grip. Their eyes were wide, fixed on the doors as they began to creak open at an agonizingly slow pace. What stepped through was tall, impossibly thin, with elongated limbs that seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally in the dim light. Its face was a blank canvas of pale, glowing skin, devoid of eyes, mouth, or any recognizable features. Yet somehow, Delaney felt its cold and absolute gaze pierce her. It was not human. It was not of this world. True whimpered, a small, choked sound, clutching her arm with desperate strength. Despite her own paralyzing fear, Delaney instinctively covered her sister's head with her right hand, a desperate, futile attempt at comfort. Surprisingly, the creature didn't advance. Instead, it remained eerily still. Its form was grotesque and unreal. It was so tall and thin, it was almost as if it were stretched too far by some cruel force. Its body was bent and angular, its limbs swaying gently, like they had too many joints. Its skin, if it could be called that, was a dull, gray-black sheen that shimmered faintly in the glow of the Christmas lights reflected from the other room. Those lights, still blinking cheerfully, felt like a cruel joke. And then came the hand. Long, spindly, too many fingers. It extended slowly toward Delaney, not with a lunge, not in a rush, but with deliberate stillness. It didn't reach for them, not directly. Instead, it hovered toward what Delaney gripped tightly in her left hand, the stone. She wanted to scream. She needed to scream. But her voice was locked somewhere deep in her chest, frozen along with everything else. Only her heartbeat thundered, deafening in her ears, as the shadow loomed closer. Jolting out of the trance, her heart hammered an alarming rhythm against her ribs. Delaney dropped the stone. She had been so consumed by reliving that night, by the terrifying presence, that she had overlooked something crucial. The stone. Where did it come from? Who had given it to them, or where had they found it? Thoughts raced through her mind, a frantic, desperate scramble, as fast as her pounding heart. She snatched some of the yellowed paper the stone had been wrapped in, scooped up the object, and practically fell out of the attic. That evening, over dinner, Delaney found herself studying her younger sister across the table. True had always possessed an effortless kind of beauty, warm brown skin, deep-set hazel eyes framed by thick lashes, and a cascade of bright red curls pulled into a loose bun. Where Delaney was sharp angles and intense focus, True was softer, more open, with a quiet confidence that drew people in. Her delicate nose and full lips naturally curled upward, as if she was always on the verge of a smile, even when she wasn't trying. True lazily pushed her food around her plate with the edge of her fork, her nails painted a muted lavender. "So," Delaney began, leaning forward slightly, her tone carefully casual, "what do you remember about our trips to South Carolina?" True shrugged without looking up. "That's random. Not much. I was like 5? We went to see family, right?" "Yes, family," Delaney replied, narrowing her eyes. "I don't remember even one of them. Do you?" True finally glanced up, her brows knitting together in thought. "Not really. I mostly just remember driving forever and stopping at random places. Oh, and stuffing stones in our pockets and shoes," she added, a light laugh escaping her. She continued, "We knew if Dad found them, he'd make us leave them behind." Delaney smirked. "Yeah, he never understood our art, did he?" "Well, they made the trip at least," True said, grinning. "But somehow, without fail, half the rocks would be gone. I always swore Dad had some kind of sixth sense for contraband pebbles." Delaney chuckled. "True, it wasn't a sixth sense. You always gave us away. You were never subtle about anything." "Excuse me," True gasped in mock offense, placing a hand over her chest. "Loki herself? I was a master of deception. So that's why it was your stones that went missing?" Delaney teased back. True chuckled and offered a half-hearted, "Well." Delaney rolled her eyes, smiling as she shook her head, refocusing her intentions. "So, really, you don't remember any of the people we visited?" True frowned slightly, chewing the inside of her cheek as she thought harder. "Not really. I know we saw a lot of different people, but no one really stands out. I remember the long drives more than anything. The way the trees blurred together when we drove past them. Oh, I do remember stopping somewhere. There was this really old man sitting outside with weird shapes or something tattooed across his forehead. He looked like he was smiling at me but saying something at the same time. I should have been scared, but, you know me, I thought it was cool. I remember Mom pulled me away. She kept saying, 'Don't look at him, don't look at him.' Funny, I didn't remember that until now. But, yeah." Delaney's stomach tightened, a cold dread seeping in. "Do you remember where that was?" "No clue." True shook her head. "Why? What's all this about, anyway?" Delaney hesitated for a second, then gave a non-committal shrug. "Nothing big. Something I'm trying to piece together." True studied her for a moment, then sighed dramatically, stabbing a piece of chicken with her fork. "You know, for someone who left home to figure things out, you should be careful adding unnecessary detective work." Delaney smirked. "I can handle bulk. It's a gift." "Well, Detective Lane," True said with a teasing smile, "good luck solving the case of the mysteriously forgotten road trip and long-lost family. Let me know if I'm secretly adopted or something." "I'll keep you posted," Delaney said, a laugh bubbling up despite the fresh wave of unease creeping up her spine. Delaney smiled faintly at the memory, but knew she couldn't rely solely on True's recollections. True had been far too young, and her easygoing nature made her less likely to question unsettling details. But Delaney couldn't let it go. Despite the primal fear the stone evoked, she carefully wrapped it tightly in cloth and placed it in a soft pouch, meticulously ensuring it wouldn't touch her skin. True's strange encounter gave her more questions than answers. But there is one thing that she was almost sure about. Between her vivid memory and the unnerving experience in the attic, her conviction was solidified. The stone reacted to her energy. Delaney sat at her desk, her eyes locked on the unwrapped stone lying bare on the towel before her. She had been careful to avoid direct contact, using the corner of the cloth to nudge its position. For now, its ominous symbols seemed to have calmed, their unsettling glow absent. She grabbed her cell and snapped several photos of the stone, zooming in on its intricate designs. She began her research with a reverse image search and a barrage of vague terms: carved symbols on granite, glowing runes on rock, ancient symbols, and rocks that glow. The initial results were a jumble of conspiracy theories, myth, historical curiosities and decorative carvings, but then, a single image grabbed her attention, pulling her in with magnetic force. It was nestled within an academic article, its title a chilling whisper: Veil Markers, Artifacts of the Otherworld. Delaney's breath hitched as she scrolled, devouring the text. The article described stones just like hers as incredibly rare, ancient objects, some dismissed as myth, others believed to bridge the very fabric between worlds. The symbols, the author claimed, were echoed in countless mythologies, consistently tied to notions of protection or, more ominously, summoning. A cold dread began to tighten its grip on her chest as she continued. These stones, it explained, reacted to concentrated energy, activating when touched by someone attuned to their peculiar power. One particular passage made her blood run utterly cold. While some veil markers are used to protect the bearer, others serve as invitations or keys, allowing entities to pass through. Delaney stared at the stone before her, its rough surface suddenly feeling intensely alive, even under the dim glow of her desk lamp. Her gaze flickered between the photo on her screen and the rock. She had found one. Or, perhaps, it had found her. A burning need for answers consumed her. She knew she had to talk to the author. She clicked the author's name, James Warden, and a small, rectangular box popped up. James Stephen Warden, professor of symbology, historian, and folklorist specializing in ancient mythologies. Further digging revealed a vast body of work, his name gracing countless academic journals, spanning everything from Nordic runes to forgotten burial rites. A faculty photo from Columbia University showed a man in his early 60s, his face a map of deep lines etched by years of relentless study and obscure knowledge. He possessed sharp, hawkish features, eyes so deep-set they seemed to scrutinize even through the screen, and graying hair, more salt than pepper, swept back in a slightly unkempt manner. Round, wire-framed glasses perched precariously on his nose, gave him the unmistakable air of someone who had spent far too many hours lost in ancient texts and dimly lit library stacks. Delaney quickly scribbled down the email address she found, drafting a message asking him to contact her. An instant, automated reply arrived, providing an emergency phone number for the professor. She called it, leaving a breathless voicemail. After several attempts, her persistence finally paid off. Late one evening, hunched over her laptop, lost in the abyss of arcane knowledge, her phone buzzed, an unfamiliar number flashed on the screen. Her heart skipped a beat, but she hesitated only for a moment before answering. Hello? A pause stretched, then a deep, measured voice spoke, its cadence rich and deliberate. I received your message, this is Professor Warden. The kind of voice that carried the weight of years spent lecturing to halls filled with eager students, yet also held a quiet intensity. There was something about the way he spoke, calm yet intensely focused, that made Delaney sit straighter. He sounded like a man who had seen more than he let on, someone who weighed his words carefully, acutely aware that knowledge, once spoken, could not be taken back. She gripped her phone tighter, her pulse quickening. Professor Warden, thank you so much for calling me back. I honestly wasn't sure I'd hear from you. He let out a quiet, almost imperceptible chuckle, though it held no amusement. I don't usually entertain inquiries from outside academic circles, he admitted, his voice a low rumble. But yours was intriguing. Delaney swallowed hard, her free hand tightening on the edge of her desk. I really need to understand this stone. A long silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken questions. When Warden finally spoke again, his voice was lower, edged with a surprising caution. Tell me everything, he said, you can start with exactly how you came across it. Delaney wasted no time, her words tumbling out in a rush, as if speaking them aloud might somehow make sense of the chaos swirling within her. I found it in my parents' attic, but I think it belonged to me. Delaney was pacing as she spoke, with her phone pressed tightly against her ear. It was in this old box, buried under layers of dust and newspapers. She hesitated, then pushed on. The first time I touched it, it was cold, just like a regular rock. But then, it started to warm up, and then. She took a shaky breath, forcing herself to steady. It started to glow. She paused, almost expecting for him to hang up on her. There was a silence on the other end, but she could sense Warden listening intently, waiting for her to continue. Glow a deep red, she clarified, her voice shaky. Or more like a burning crimson, like embers beneath the surface. It got so hot I couldn't hold it anymore. It felt like it was searing right into my palm, but when I dropped it, there was no burn. No mark. She exhaled, a small, ragged sound. Just this overwhelming feeling that I'd woken something up. And a memory, too. Something I must have suppressed, of a. She ran a hand through her curls, trying to collect her scattered thoughts. I don't know what this thing is, but I know it's not just a rock. It reacts to me, and I think, no, I know it has something to do with my family. And I don't know why. She paused again, choosing her next words with painstaking care. She swallowed hard, gripping the phone until her knuckles ached. So, how can I tell if it's protecting me, or if it's inviting something through? For a long moment, Warden said nothing, and the silence felt heavier than the stone itself. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower still, edged with something that sounded almost like genuine concern. The answer isn't that simple, unfortunately, he explained. A single stone can actually act as both, depending entirely on the context and, more importantly, the bearer. But there is one crucial clue, the color. What does the color mean? Delaney asked, her grip tightening, desperate for a tangible answer. If the runes glow white or yellow, the stone is likely offering protection, the professor explained, his words measured. But if the color is orange or red, then it may be functioning as a conduit. A conduit, for what? Delaney pressed, a chill seeping into her bones. Are they human? Were they ever? The professor's tone grew more somber, a subtle shift that made her skin prickle. No, the entities these stones connect to have never walked the earth in human form. They are different. Some cultures describe them as spirits, others, as ancient beings locked behind the veil. What is consistent, however, is their profound angst and overwhelming sense of superiority to humankind. They see themselves as rulers, unjustly imprisoned. Delaney swallowed hard, the word catching in her throat. So they're demons? Her last word was barely a whisper. Professor Warden chuckled softly, a dry, unsettling sound devoid of humor. Well, I suppose some may consider them so. His words hung in the air, a chilling weight that Delaney couldn't shake. Unfortunately, he continued, I don't think you have a choice in pursuing this. If the rune showed a crimson glow as you say, I suggest you speak to my associate, Sylvie Hart. She's convinced she's encountered one of these entities, or at least the direct result of their influence. She may have insights I simply cannot provide. The professor quickly rattled off Sylvie's contact information. Delaney thanked him, her mind already racing, before hanging up. She sat in silence, staring at the inert stone on her desk. Both times I held it, the runes glowed crimson, she thought, the fear creeping back into her chest with renewed vigor. What happened after it took the stone? Why did I find it here, buried in a box labeled, for you? Her thoughts raced, an unceasing torrent, as she turned Sylvie's name over and over in her mind. I have got to speak to her.
Next up in Bloodstone Origin, Part 3, Hidden Truth. Thank you for listening with us at Gale of Tales. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. May these tales linger until the next Gale arrives.